How's it going, everyone? Hope you guys are having a great day. Basically today I'm going to be going over how to install a 22mm carb from Nibbi onto the XPro 125 Storms. I know there are videos out there claiming that they fit up a 22mm carb on the Storms, but they don't necessarily explain what they did to modify it onto the Storms. If you do have one, you do come in a realization that it's definitely a very tight fit with the stock intake manifold that's on there. There's no clearance on the fuel tank for the throttle cable. There's a lot of rubbing. So basically today I'm gonna go over and show you guys what my process is to fit this one, or the 220 or the 22mm carb from Nibbi onto the XPro Storm. So let's get to it. Okay, so basically here I've already taken off the OEM carburetor and the intake manifold. I just have it right here. Basically, I just took off the two bolts here. I left the intake gasket on still, but this is the factory, but for some reason it was rubbing and cracked the cap. So if you know, it's very tight up in this little area where the throttle cable is. So I've already removed it. I'm not really going to explain how to remove it. It's very self-explanatory. So let's go on to the next part. So here's the new Nibbi carb setup, the 22mm from Nibbi. And then this is a aftermarket intake manifold, which is what they call it. It's self-adjusting right there. If you see, I have the cap already installed. That's pretty easily to do. You just slide in the throttle cable through here, make sure your spring and the retainer right there is in and everything. There is right here in this area from the stock throttle cable, there's this little piece right here. You just take the little rubber grommet off of this end and then just slide the rest of the cable through and take this piece off, because you no longer need this piece on the throttle cable. So to back what I was saying, the new Nibbi 22mm carburetor and then the new intake manifold. You could probably tell the difference. The new aftermarket one on the bottom here is slightly shorter. Yes, the Nibbi one does have adjustments here, but it's just not enough for what you need. You can see here, and for some reason, it's like if you look there, this one's slightly clocked a little bit more, which is going to help you with the room trying to get this top side where your throttle cable and everything goes. That way you have room. Okay, so basically all I did was put the throttle and the spring inside the assembly. I just have it sitting in here. That way I can see. You can see that there's kind of a gap right here, right? That's just due to the Nibbi carb sitting on the heat sink fins. So basically what you want to just do, I did have this in earlier, put the bolts in just very slightly snug, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark these fins right here, and I'm gonna take a Dremel or die grinder and just so slightly make some clearance right under it so it doesn't hit, and that way I can make a little more adjustment up here for the throttle, because you don't want this to hang or stick while you're riding, because I know a lot of times with these bikes, with these style carburetors, everything, if you turn the bars, the cable gets tight and starts to raise the idle. So we don't want any tension, and especially if we can keep everything straight as possible. So I did have this in here earlier where it does sit flat, but you have to clock the carburetor out, and it looks kind of weird. So I like it a little more tucked in so it's not gonna get hit or damaged if the spike falls. So I'm just gonna take a few, maybe a couple millimeters off of these fins, probably these back 3 right here. That way the fuel drain is barely cleared and there's gonna be any rubbing. A lot of people are probably gonna hate that I'm taking away on that, but honestly, I don't really care, because me putting this carburetor on here, this thing's gonna run a lot more clean, and it takes away a lot of heat from running cleaner. So I'm not really concerned about just taking a couple millimeters off of those fins. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then I'll get back to you, and then we'll try to fit this up, and I'll show you what I do next. All right, well, I guess I'm pretty much done with dremeling now. I bet you saw in the time lapse that I was getting metal shavings in the carb. I just went with my blower, blew everything out, and blew the carb out. I just wasn't paying attention, but I did put a paper towel in the intake here. But this is what I did, is if you can see right here is what the originals used to look like. And then I basically took these down about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, roughly right between that. I just barely took them down that way, where you right here on the Nibbi carb can clear a little bit better. I just don't want anything rubbing. You don't have to do that. You can, what I was saying earlier, just clock the intake out a little further. I just, for clearance issues, I just don't want it getting hit, so I'm doing this. You can literally go to Harbor Freight or anywhere, buy a cheap Dremel and just go at this slowly and then keep taking the intake and carb, putting it up here, making sure it clears, and whenever you feel comfortable you can just start to bolt everything up. But I'm gonna bolt this up, show you what it looks like, and go from there. All right, so I got everything bolted in. So for this, since it is like super adjustable, you just want to make sure that you put your hands on both sides of the intake. That way you're not sliding back and forth, and you can make sure that you align it pretty much center onto the intake hole, and then tighten these bolts down. You still have room for carb, which is nice. So if you're in the colder climates, that's gonna come in handy. I don't have to deal with any of that because I live here in Vegas. It's super hot year round. So, but you can basically see the clearance. It's not gonna touch right around there. Like, I didn't probably have to go that much at all, but that's just for reinsurance. If this gets hit or anything, it's not just gonna start vibrating onto the head. I did do the fuel line and everything. I made sure this is as straight as possible because you don't want your throttle cable getting hung up, or you're gonna get like a stuck open throttle and you're gonna have to turn the bike off immediately. Just make sure everything's not sticking. I am going to put the new air filter on, but I'm gonna start it first, adjust the carb, which is on this side, and make sure everything's kosher, there's no leaks, anything, and see how it idles with this new intake manifold and carburetor. All right, I got the bike out from over the corner. Okay, I'm gonna do first startup and just a carb, let you guys hear. I wish I did a before and after, but if you really know how bad the OEM carbs on these bikes are non-adjustable, you should know how rough it is. But I'm gonna give this thing a first startup, let it idle, let it run. Alright, I got the bike started. Hopefully you guys can hear me, but basically just don't try to burn your hand. You adjust the idle, you can hear how it's raising the idle, and then you can idle it back down. Basically, you want to get it to a point where it's not going to stall, but it'll maintain idle right when you're like off throttle. So like if you give it and it doesn't stall, you can probably lean it a little bit more. If it does stall, rich it up a little bit and then try again, and then you should find the sweet spot by doing that, and basically off of just listening how it's idling. But I just love the adjustability on these Nibbi carbs. I know the factory ones, if you adjust this, it does absolutely nothing. But just going in here and just turning this knob, it raises the idle just like that. That is like awesome. So, alright guys, so I am gonna be leaving this video here. So if you guys have any questions or anything, please leave them down in the comments. If you guys like the video, please like the video. I will be leaving all the parts in the description, like the intake manifold and the carburetor. That's pretty much all you need, unless you want to go get a Dremel to make a little bit more clearance for the carburetor right there, but truly you don't have to. I did get that intake manifold off of eBay. I believe it was a little bit cheaper, and shipping said it would be a little bit faster than Amazon because it is coming from China. So if you guys want to see more videos like this, please let me know. I do have an Apollo and an SSR that need upgrades, so if you guys want to see that stuff, please let me know. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Hey.